Today, we are diving into something really intense, the incredible pressure that teenagers face to look, well, perfect. Let's get right into it and see just how deep this whole thing goes.
So, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll get a handle on the scale of this pressure. Then, we'll zoom out for a global picture, look at the very real human cost, and finally, talk about how the idea of beauty itself is being challenged.
All right, let's jump into our first section. We're going to try and understand the very foundation of this appearance-based anxiety and just how big of a deal it really is.
So the big question is, where does this all start? You might think this kind of pressure really kicks in during the late teens, but the source material shows us something different. It actually starts much, much earlier than you'd expect.
Just take a look at these numbers. It's pretty eye-opening. A huge chunk of people seeking out beauty treatments, we're talking between 20 and 30%, are teenagers. That's a massive number, and it tells you these worries are taking hold at a surprisingly young age.
Okay, so let's move on and see how this pressure is playing out on a global scale. We're going to look at how a general feeling of unhappiness can actually lead to some very specific actions. And this right here, this is a staggering statistic. Nearly half of all teenagers are actively unhappy with the way they look. I mean, when you see a number that high, you realize this isn't just about individual insecurity, it's pointing to a much larger systemic problem.
And to see just how far that unhappiness can go, let's look at Brazil. Over half of the teenagers there would actually consider getting plastic surgery. You know, this isn't just about wanting to look a little better. It's about a deep-seated feeling that you need to fundamentally change who you are.
So what exactly is driving all this worry? Well, it often starts with the usual stuff many of us go through, right? Acne, stretch marks, or maybe for some guys, ears that stick out. But what's really telling is how the pressure amplifies these anxieties. It leads some teens to worry about things like saggy skin or a hooked nose, concerns you'd normally associate with people much, much older.
And this is where things get really serious. Because this isn't just about feeling worried or unhappy. This immense pressure can, and does, escalate into a full-blown health crisis. The consequences can be tragic.
One of the most severe outcomes is anorexia nervosa. The thing that's so crucial to understand about it is the distorted perception of one's own body. It's a genuine, powerful belief that you're much heavier than you are, and it's all driven by this intense fear of gaining any weight at all.
This slide, well, it shows the stark human reality of it all. Both Anna Carolina Reston and Carlos Rodocastle were young, just 21 years old. They were both tall, over 1.7 meters. And yet, they both died weighing only 40 kilograms. Those numbers just underscore how absolutely devastating this illness is. The sources also point to a very clear trend. This illness affects girls 9 times more than it affects boys. And maybe the most alarming part? Specialists are now seeing and diagnosing it in children as young as 9 years old. 9.
Okay, so, with the stakes being this incredibly high, it becomes absolutely essential to start questioning the very standards that are creating all this pressure to begin with. So let's move to our final section and see how those standards can be challenged.
And this is the core idea right here. These standards, they feel so rigid, so permanent, but they're not. They are constructed by society, and that means they can be questioned, they can be pushed, and ultimately they can be changed.
A fantastic example of someone who did just that is the model Andrea Pajek. Now, at the time this source was published, Pajek was modeling as Andre and was known for these striking features. Super tall, platinum hair, lush lips, chiseled cheekbones. Pajek's whole career was a direct challenge to the norms of the industry. And this right here illustrates that challenge perfectly. Pajek, as a male model at the time, was walking the catwalk in roles that were traditionally and exclusively reserved for female models. It was a direct subversion of the industry's rigid gendered rules, and it proved they could be broken. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that examples like Pajek's prove that the so-called rules of appearance aren't set in stone. They force us to ask a really fundamental question. What does good looking even mean anyway? Which leaves us with one final thought. And this one's really for you to reflect on. Given everything we've seen, this intense focus on appearance from such a young age, how do you, personally, navigate that tricky space between your own self-expression and the enormous social pressure to fit a very specific and often unrealistic ideal?